Hello there. Thank you for connecting with me. I love the connections I have with all of my YouTube viewers. I know that I'm providing you with all the information you need to collect and connect all the dots and manage your menopause your way. If you're new to this channel, this is actually a good video for you. It's all about collecting and connecting the dots. You see, this channel is quite unusual. Instead of randomly addressing topics, I follow a very precise syllabus. And I do so because as your professor, I know darn well that there is no way on earth you will ever be able to collect and connect all the dots if you don't learn everything about menopause in a chronological, stepwise manner. So we've just completed a unit on cancer in general, and next week we'll start a unit on uterine cancer. But to break up the big topics, I like to present topics like this one to help you put things into perspective. It's also to give you a little break from between the big, heavy subjects. So today, we'll discuss how you accumulate knowledge about menopause, which constitutes collecting the dots, and how you make sense of your fund of knowledge, which constitutes connecting the dots. This is not in my book, in either the first edition or the second edition. This is just practical information. And I felt compelled to create this video precisely because so many video viewers watch my videos in random order. You know, we live in a world where things that used to be very orderly have become random. Over time, things have really changed in terms of how we gather information. You know, way back in the olden days when I was young, the only way to gather information was to go to the library. It used to be common to spend quite a lot of time in libraries gathering information. I can remember going to the library, conducting a literature search, collecting piles and books of articles, and then poring over them for hours in order to collect all the information on a topic and then connect all the information in a coherent manner. This was something I did for every report I had to write, and there were specific steps for writing a report. First, I took notes from all the books and articles, and since the notes would be in random order as I encountered the information in my resource materials, it had to be organized later. That's where the outline came in. Oh, how I love outlines. They are just such a great way to organize information. To this day, I outline everything I read. Like this, I have piles and piles of things that I have outlined. Every book gets outlined. It's like, I can't help myself. Yep, that's what I do. Believe it or not, I really do outline everything I read. After making the outline, I wrote the report itself in proper paragraph format. After that came the bibliography, citing the resources I used to gather the information. Of course, there was a title page too, but I would make that last, and I would make it pretty. The copy machine was invented in 1938, but it wasn't until 1959 that the Xerox machine started appearing in the workplace. Well, I was born in 1959, and copy machines were not available anywhere but businesses for quite some time. They were not readily available in libraries until I was in high school. I'll never forget how thrilled I was when the school library installed a copy machine. It just felt so efficient to be able to copy the piles of information I needed for my reports, take it all home, and complete the report there. Other than the library, the only source of information was an encyclopedia. Do you remember those encyclopedia salesmen who used to come to your front door? The encyclopedia was great because it organized all the information by topic. Our house always had at least 3 complete sets of encyclopedia, and I loved them. In fact, I thought they were better reading than just about any textbook. I started reading them all cover to cover, just like I'd read any book. but I stopped when my brother teased me mercilessly about it and told all the other kids that I was reading encyclopedias cover to cover. Well, nowadays, you rarely see people going to libraries to gather information, and you rarely see anyone using an encyclopedia. Instead, everyone goes to the internet. But the internet isn't organized, and much of what you find on the internet is not education. It's advertising. And because the internet is so accessible in a way that enables you to get little bits and pieces of information rather than the whole topic, you get nothing but sound bites instead of education. The difference between a real education and sound bites is huge. A real education is a structured, organized, growing fund of knowledge that you build from the foundation up. Everything you learn connects with the last thing you learned, and it sets the stage and the foundation for the next thing you learn. But sound bites are completely random. You hear one thing from your girlfriend, you read something else in a junk magazine from a non-credible source, you see an advertisement about something that you take as fact when it's really only a lie designed to coerce you into buying a product. Instead of a structured, growing fund of knowledge, you have bits and pieces of this and that, some true, some false, with nothing to connect them. But the human brain always tries to make sense of what it knows. So despite the fact that you collected sound bites from here and there, your brain tries to make sense of them by connecting them. In other words, it tries to connect the dots. In connecting the dots, you don't bother to consider the sources of your information, and you don't bother to question the little bit of information you have. Heck, you probably don't know enough to even come up with questions. You don't assess whether each dot of information is true or untrue, fact or fiction. You just handle it all as one big mass of information. So you assume that what you know is fact, and that's that. And from there, you form an opinion about what it is you think you know. An opinion. That is another quandary for me. In the course of my lifetime, education has become rare, while opinions have become rampant. My father was a military man, and when I was growing up, he would say, "You don't have a right to an opinion until you have an education." I can hear his voice in my head as I say that. But you know, he was right. And now I find myself so perplexed by the fact that I live in a world where so few people have an education, but everyone is spouting off about their opinion. It's just baffling to me. You've heard me tell you over and over to watch my videos in order. And the reason I implore you to do so is because I know that if you gather information on menopause in any other way, you will definitely sabotage your menopause education. Still, no matter how much I beg you to stick with the order, there are women who think they can get this education by picking and choosing which videos to watch, by skipping those that they assume to be inapplicable to them, or by watching them in random order. They think they know enough to decide which videos to watch. They think they don't need some of the videos. They think they know what doesn't apply to them simply based on the titles of the videos. Let me tell you something. If that's how you operate, you wouldn't have survived long in my father's house. What in the world makes you think you have any right to decide what you do and do not need when you don't yet have an education? You don't know what you don't know. I assure you that you have no idea as to which videos I'll use for imparting critical information. My creativity goes much deeper than the titles of my videos. So let me demonstrate various scenarios of information gathering and their outcomes. Basically, it boils down to how you collect the dots and how you connect the dots. Scenario 1 is the case for most women. It was probably the case for you before discovering my menopause education. It's the case in which you know absolutely nothing about menopause. You've heard the word maybe, but beyond that, you know nothing. So you had no collection of dots. If we were to depict a slate demonstrating your fund of knowledge, it would look like this. Blank. A blank slate because you know absolutely nothing. Scenario 2 is the second most common situation. This is where you've heard a sound bite or two about menopause. You have no idea where you heard them or whether they're factual. And you certainly haven't bothered to verify them or build on them. You just know a few tidbits or dots, and that's all. So you assume that's all there is to know. Here's how your slate demonstrating your fund of knowledge would look in this situation. All you know is 3 dots of information that have no relationship to one another. But remember, your human brain always tries to make sense of what it knows or thinks it knows. So your brain connects the dots. When you connect these dots, nothing makes sense, but you just leave it at that and decide not to question the fact that none of it makes any sense whatsoever. Scenario 3 is where you start getting my menopause education. At first, you still have the sound bites from scenario 2. And at first, you don't bother to start with video 1 and watch them all in order. You think you can get what you need by jumping around randomly in the order. So you watch a few videos and gather more information and collect more dots. Here's what your slate depicting your fund of knowledge looks like now. So now you've added 5 more pieces of information or dots to your fund of knowledge. Interestingly, some of what you've learned from this education makes perfect sense. After collecting the dots, though, comes connecting the dots. And you have no trouble whatsoever connecting some of the dots, but only for the information that actually makes sense. The rest just doesn't seem to fit. But funnily enough, instead of separating soundbite knowledge from what you learned in this education, you just can't seem to discard the old information. Even though some of your collected dots don't connect, they linger and litter the ones that do. Because you don't have enough education to decipher fact from fiction, you go ahead and connect the dots by combining what makes sense from this education with what makes no sense from the sound bites. And here's what you get. It all seems completely disjointed to you, but you just keep on watching the videos randomly, collecting and connecting dots haphazardly, and deluding yourself into believing that you'll be able to use the information successfully. Did you notice that there are red dots and green dots? Well, the green dots are facts. The red dots are fiction. So green is good and red is rotten. But you don't know that. Because you've gone about getting your menopause education in a chaotic manner, you have no idea what's fact and what's fiction. Why? Because the power of a real education is to be able to decipher fact from fiction. It enables you to designate which dots are just nonsense. But when you combine a real education or facts with sound bites of fiction, you sabotage your ability to differentiate the two. You actually make the situation worse than if you knew nothing. So now scenario 4 is where you see the futility of your random way of collecting the dots. The worthlessness of collecting the dots that you cannot connect begins to loom large. So you decide that you really need to just start at the beginning and get your menopause education the right way. So you go all the way back to video 1 and you start watching them all in order. As you do, you realize that half of what you thought was fact is actually complete fiction. And you see that by learning everything in order, it all makes perfect sense. You collect more and more dots that are fact. And it enables you to see that there are so many dots that are fiction. Not only that, the factual dots actually line up and connect beautifully. It's a no-brainer. And you see that you were previously all wrong in the way you were connecting the dots. So here's what your fund of knowledge looks like now. Notice that there is no way to connect the red dots to the green dots. In this scenario, you've discovered how to ignore the red dots. They are just floating alone as sound bites that have no basis in fact. So now you're able to distinguish the good green factual dots from the rotten red fictional dots. This is where you shake the head in disbelief at how little you knew before you started watching my videos in order. It's all so clear to you now. So, a shift from random sound bites and a chaotic educational order to a chronologic education will eventually wake you up to the fact that you had so much all wrong. But why do that to yourself? You waste so much valuable time in the process. Why not just adopt scenario 5 from the start? Scenario 5 is when you get this entire education in order without confusing the issue with all the sound bites. You start at video 1 from the very beginning. And along the way, I dispel all the fictions so that you know they are just that, fictional. And your orderly education equips you with the ability to see why they're fictional. There sure are a lot of them. But you just continue collecting and connecting the dots for the facts and ignoring the dots for the fiction. Once again, notice that there is no connection from any of the rotten red dots to any of the good green dots. You recognize the red dots as rotten fictions that have no bearing on your making good decisions for your menopause management. If you didn't have a proper, orderly, stepwise education on menopause, you would not be able to distinguish red dots from green dots. And you would just connect fictional information with factual information, and it would look like this. I encounter this situation all the time in my comments on my YouTube channel. It's actually what induced me to create this video. A woman will watch a few videos randomly, and then she'll pose a question in the comment box that reveals her inadequate menopause education. The question itself will be so disjointed that there is no way to answer it. Even in posing the question itself, she will mingle facts and fiction. For instance, she'll ask, if I have a hysterectomy and become postmenopausal because of it, can I take progesterone and still avoid estrogen dominance? Every single phrase of that question is so off in its logic that it makes no sense at all. It's as if she asked, if I amputate my arms and cannot walk because of my arm amputations, can I wear my baby's clothing and still avoid being female? I mean, I know that sounds far-fetched, but all I have done is use direct analogies for every single thing she wrote. A hysterectomy does not cause postmenopause any more than arm amputations impair your ability to walk. Progesterone is the baby's hormone, so you can't solve your problems of postmenopause with progesterone any more than you could wear your baby's clothes. And estrogen dominance is not a real entity, not at least one that is abnormal. And if you are female, you are by definition estrogen dominant, just as a male is testosterone dominant. So by getting the education from the beginning in the proper order, you arm yourself with the knowledge to communicate coherently about menopause. You collect dots and then connect the dots easily. So this is why I beg you over and over to watch my videos in order. If you don't want to incorporate fact with fiction, you just have to get this education the right way. It's the difference between this and this. Okay, I hope this convinces you. That's all for today. Join me next week when I'll begin the unit on uterine cancer. Until then, go to menopausetailor.me if you want a shortcut in connecting all the dots. In fact, you'll get to collect all the dots and connect all the dots all in a consultation. A consultation is the way to go if you just can't force yourself to watch these videos in order. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram in any order you want. And subscribe in order to be an official student here at Menopause University. Bye!